Yo, this is the brand new 15-inch M2 MacBook Air, and this is the 16-inch M2 Max MacBook Pro. In today's video, we're gonna compare these two laptops head to head, and I'll tell you three major differences between the two. So first, let's talk about this M2 16-inch MacBook Pro. This is Apple's biggest and most powerful and expensive laptop to date. It has a starting price of $2,500 for the base M2 Pro with 512 gigabytes of storage and 16 gigabytes of RAM. The 15-inch MacBook Air is Apple's newest laptop. It has a stock M2 chip. It's an 8-core CPU, and it's starting off with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage for $1,300. Now, the 15-inch MacBook Air in this video was supplied by Apple. It has 16 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte hard drive. For the past few years, majority of people just need the MacBook Air. There's not a big difference for a lot of people. But for me, as someone who does video for a living, there's no compromises I want to make. I'm always buying a MacBook Pro. But for normal consumers like a student or a family laptop, using the MacBook Air for things like web browsing, listening to music, working on documents, and even playing a couple of games, the MacBook Air performed flawlessly. And for me, taking this laptop to a coffee shop, taking it to my parents' house, just lugging it around was just a whole lot easier. And just it being so thin and so light, you don't have to truly account for it when you are traveling and you just want to throw it inside of your bag. Whereas when I have the 16-inch MacBook, I have to use a certain bag for it because of how thick it is and how heavy it is. So when you compare the two head to head, the Pro versus the Air, there's definitely going to be some compromises, but I don't think many people would actually run into those compromises. And we'll talk about all those things a little bit later in the video. Now, speaking of video, I actually edit this video using the MacBook Air. It felt like the MacBook Pro for the most part. Now, I typically do run a lot of apps at once, and I could easily have Final Cut, Pixelmator, Spotify, and Safari with like 10 tabs open, and this laptop kept up with it. Now, granted, if you had 8 gigabytes of RAM, maybe this wouldn't be the best method of using your computer, but with 16 gigabytes of RAM, it was holding up neck to neck with my M2 Pro. Now, remember, I said for the most part, there's not gonna be many differences. So the differences are gonna be very small. So for example, when transcoding footage, the MacBook Air took 4 minutes and 10 seconds, and the MacBook Pro took 2 minutes and 23 seconds. So a couple extra minutes is not the end of the world, and once it transcoded, performance was pretty much the same. But if you're a person that relies on that speed and need to get things out much faster, like someone doing weddings, then obviously having that extra couple of minutes makes the most sense. Now, when using it day to day, I did find that 18 hours of battery life that Apple said seems to be pretty accurate. And that's gonna be with normal usage. Like I said, the web browsing and a couple FaceTime calls and checking email, working on documents and things that you do on a laptop, that's how you get that 18 hours of battery life. But 18 versus 23 is very negligible if you're using a laptop every day and you plug it in at the end of the night. And to be honest, if I had to choose between size and battery life, I'm gonna take battery life over size. I think 15 inches is definitely the sweet spot when it comes to portability and also getting work done. Now, I do love the 16-inch display on the MacBook Pro, but when you combine that with the thickness, it becomes a little too big. So when you're on the airplane, you're not able to put it on the tray table. It's kind of a struggle to work and be on a plane at this size. So people shouldn't buy the 16-inch laptop for maximum portability. That's not what you're buying it for. You're buying it as you're gonna be stationary and working on it. Whereas the 15, although just an inch smaller, is still better for most people. And I can't get over it being thin, how much more practical it becomes when you're taking it in and out of a bag. The MacBook Pro has 1,000 nits of brightness compared to the 500 on the Air. In a situation like this, in an office, really doesn't matter. But when you can take advantage of it is when you're outside. On a bright sunny day, I took the Air outside, I put the brightness all the way up, and I still could see everything, and it was fine. But when I took the Pro outside and cranked it all the way up, it was just like I was sitting down here in the basement. It was so bright. And what helps the MacBook Air to be so thin is that it doesn't have a fan built into it. And obviously there's a fan on the Pro, but to be honest, around 95% of the time, I don't hear the fan kick on at all. Now, when I do hear the fan kick on, that is during gaming or any type of rendering that is like very high-end video with like tons of layers of graphics and things like that. Not like your standard video. So when doing things like that, when it comes to extended amount of gaming or some high-end rendering back to back, the MacBook Air does start to slow down a little bit. Whereas the Pro never slows down because that fan is keeping the chip at that proper temperature. This is the webcam on the 15-inch MacBook Air. This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like. I am in, I guess, my living room. I have normal lighting, no studio lighting, and this is kind of what you'd expect if you're doing like a FaceTime, if you're doing like a Zoom call or anything like that. This is the quality you should expect. And this is the MacBook Pro webcam. Same situation, same scenario. My son's watching TV in the background. He's over there screaming. You know, just a normal situation. Let me know which one looks better, which one sounds better. Is there a difference at all? I want to know what you think. Leave it down below in the comments. And just for the heck of it, this is what a high-end webcam looks like. This is the Insta360 Link. If you're interested in upgrading the webcam, this is a great one. Not sponsored. I just personally love this webcam. Both of these laptops have 6 speakers. And since the MacBook Pro is bigger, it feels like there's more depth, which allows the speakers to sound more full and more wide. But let me know what you think.
That fella ends up being an ace himself, and so now we got 2 aces. 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 Oh, heck, I did it again. I'm sorry. Now we got 2 aces. 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 Oh, heck, I did it again. I'm stuck. Aces. That's the word, yeah? Aces. Aces.
Apple talks about gaming a whole lot. The MacBook Air definitely can game. Apple Arcade games run flawlessly, but that's expected because those games are mobile games. Now, when you check out AAA titles, you should expect medium settings anywhere between 30 or 40 frames per second. Resident Evil is a good example. It runs fine, it's playable, but once you start using the M2 Max MacBook Pro, then it's just a whole different game. You're getting 60 frames per second and the brighter screen kicks in for some great visuals. So my opinion hasn't changed for quite a few years when it comes to the MacBook Air, and that's not a bad thing. I think both laptops are just sort of digging in the ground as far as what makes these laptops great and what types of people should buy what. And being honest, there's a lot of people in that MacBook Pro segment that should be in the Air. For the most part, the Air is just as fast, has nearly the same battery life, and it's way lighter and just makes more sense. When putting my content creator hat on, that's the only time I see the difference between the Air and the Pro. The Air has 2 Thunderbolt ports, the MacBook Pro has 3, and also the MacBook Pro has HDMI and also SD card slot. This MacBook Air stacks up against the fastest laptops available. It's better than most, and also Mac laptops last a very long time. If you want to dig deeper into MacBooks, click on my playlist right here.